So last time we talked about how to add keyframes to add motion to objects. We worked with the timeline. We can see our keyframes down here with little yellow lines. We know where our start frame is and our end frame is with these indicators, and then which frame we're actually looking at right now. We can just click to move where what frame we're looking at. Today we're going to talk about a different view. So we're going to switch from the default view that we've been using all year in Blender over to animation view. And that lets us still see our 3D viewport where we can play our animation. It also gives us a camera perspective over here. I'll talk more about that in the next video when I talk about how to keyframe your camera. And then this is the window that we're going to use the most. This is where we can see our keyframes. Each little diamond is a keyframe. I always first collapse these little left-hand down arrows so that I can see one line per object. I really don't use any of that other stuff that's inside, which you can expand out quite a bit. So I also notice that I have 3 cubes here, and that's not very useful for knowing which object I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and rename these. So I can tell that right now the green cube is selected because this is white and the green cube is selected in yellow. So I'm going to rename that green. I just double click and type and hit enter. And now let's see, this one's blue. And that must be green. Okay. So to work with these keyframes, you can use a lot of the same commands that you do in this window. So wherever your mouse is, that's the window you're controlling. If my mouse is over here, I can do A to unselect and select all of my objects. Over here, I can use A to select and unselect all of my keyframes. So yellow is selected. I can right-click to select just one keyframe. I can use a box select with just B on my keyboard to select multiple keyframes. You'll notice that this top line it shows selection if anything in that row is selected. So if I select something in this column, if something in this column is selected, it shows that something is selected with that. And that can be helpful when you have a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of objects being selected and you're not sure if something is selected in that row or column. So you can also move keyframes. This is useful if something is happening too fast or too slow. So maybe I made all of these keyframes the same amount apart, but I wanted to make the action happen more quickly at the beginning and more slowly at the end. You can right-click, start dragging the keyframe. When you let up on the button, you still have that keyframe attached to your mouse. You have to left-click to set where that keyframe is. If you box select multiple keyframes, or A select, I guess, whatever, if you have multiple keyframes selected, you can no longer right-click and drag because it'll reselect, and that's not what you want. You can use the G key on your keyboard to pick up multiple keyframes and grab them and drag them where you want them. You can delete keyframes, so if I wanted to delete a bunch or a single keyframe, whatever you have selected, you can delete just like normal with the X key and delete keyframes and they're gone. You can also undo what you did in this window just like normal with Control Z. You can scale keyframes by using the S key, and watch what happens when I hit S. It scales toward and away from wherever your green timeline indicator is. So usually you'll want your timeline indicator at the beginning of whatever you're trying to scale. So if you want to scale everything, like all your action is happening too fast or too slow, you'll want that to be at the beginning, and then you hit S and you can scale there. If I only wanted to, box select, A box select. So if I wanted to just scale this end part because it was happening whatever, too fast or too slow, I can put my timeline indicator before those and then scale that way. I can also duplicate keyframes, and the advantage of that is to have an object stay still. So if I look at this animation again, maybe I want that blue cube to stay still at the beginning. So if it's at the beginning, you can just move your, let me move this over a little bit. You can just move your first keyframe to the right. Okay. So if I right click on this first keyframe and move it to the right, now the blue cube should stay still for a little while at the beginning and then start its movement, which will now be more quick because I've put those two keyframes closer together. Okay. And then maybe I want it to pause at the top. Well, now I don't have a keyframe that's, you know, at the edge to move. I would need to duplicate that movement of the keyframe. So this is where it was at the beginning, this is when it's at the top, and this is when it goes back down. So I need to duplicate the keyframe at the top. So I'm going to right click just to select that one keyframe. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate, and when I move my mouse, you can see that it has this orange line. That means that that object is staying still. It's not, nothing is happening. So it's kind of like frozen for that time. So now if I play, the cube should stay still at the beginning, quickly go up to the top, stay still, and then go back down.